Hey, listeners, just a few words before we dive in. We use colorful language, so now's probably a good time to put those headphones on. Also, we use a lot of humor, and we do this for two reasons. One, we bring levity, and the other is we reduce the tenseness of the very dark and serious subject matter that we discuss. At no point at any time is our humor ever to be disrespectful to the victims or the families of the victims of the cases that we cover. And be sure to listen all the way to the end. We have some palate cleansing bloopers that we include just to reset your mindset. We thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crime Will Tell. My name is Jamie.
They call me Carrie.
Yeah. Fucking cheers, first of all.
Cheers.
Clink.
What do you got today?
Uh,
Beer?
I have orange and honey blonde ale.
I have a cranberry vodka cocktail.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Fancy tits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So today, Carrie,
What are you telling me today?
strap in. I am telling you the story of the unfortunate murder of Veronica Bozza.
Oh.
The reason that I chose this particular case as my first one is because I actually knew Veronica.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So I used to live in Nashville and got to work with Veronica on occasion. She was a very, very sweet person. I didn't know her well. I'm not trying to paint it like we were besties and hung out or anything, but I did. She was a work acquaintance. So, and I knew her well enough to know that she was a very, very good human being. And so I wanted to tell the story.
Wow.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So this story takes place in Hermitage, Tennessee. And that's actually a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, which is where Veronica worked. She was originally from Milan, Italy.
Oh, no way.
Yes. So
Jealous.
Nashville is kind of a melting pot. There's a lot of people come there for the music industry. So there's a lot of different accents, but Veronica definitely stood out. And I loved when she would call, and it was always just like, Jamie, it's Veronica. And I'm like, yeah, it is. Keep talking, girl. What else you got? I loved it. I loved her accent. It was fantastic. So she actually moved to the United States when she was 23 from Italy. She wanted to pursue a career in the entertainment industry. So she was working as a TV producer, and at the time, her career was like really taking off. She was a devout Catholic and had a ton of friends. You know, she was just really well loved and well respected in the industry and in the community. One of her really close friends described her as a gentle soul with a huge heart.
Did she have any family in the States?
Not that I know of. I didn't see anything about that, but I believe she just kind of came to the US on her own. So in 1994, Veronica married Tim Bozza. And 7 years after they were married, they welcomed a son who she absolutely loved and adored. She loved being a mom, and her little boy was like her entire world. And after 15 years of marriage, she and Tim separated and were co-parenting their son. We are going to fly back in time to August 29th of 2010.
Okay. I'm with you.
So this was a Sunday, and at the time, Veronica would have been 39 years old. That Sunday morning, she went to Mass.
Devout Catholic girl.
Yeah, right? So she went to Mass at St. Edward's Catholic Church. And after the service, she met with Tim, her husband, outside the church to drop off their son, which was just kind of a regular thing for them.
Like doing an exchange?
Yeah, yeah. So he was
Okay.
spending the day with his dad, and that was just kind of their typical arrangement. So she then spoke on the phone with her boyfriend, whose name was Brian Robinson, and then another coworker on the on her drive home. So she spoke with two different people on her drive home.
Okay, so wait. So the I'm with you. Did she drop her son off with Tim, and so now she's driving home and she's having these 2 conversations and she does not have her child with her.
Right. Yep.
Okay,
So her
okay.
husband now has their son and she's kind of free for the rest of the day. And so she's just checking in with a coworker and making plans with her boyfriend, Brian.
Got it.
So she and Brian had only been dating for a few months at that time. He was also a TV producer and they met working on a show together. So she and Brian had plans that day and they were going to meet at Veronica's house. So that's why, they were just kind of chatting, making plans. So when Brian arrived at her house, the garage door was open and her car was in the garage, which was a little strange. So as he walked up, he noticed that the door going into the house was also wide open.
Okay, so was the garage door being open the strange part, or was the garage door being open and her being home the strange part? Was he not expecting her to be home?
No, she was going to be home, but just typically I think when she was home, she
Kept
closed
the
the
door
garage
shut for
door.
safety reasons.
Yeah, and
Got
so
it.
he was kind of like, that's weird. And then as he got closer, he noticed that the garage door going into the house was open as well.
And that's straight up weird.
Yeah, so that was
Okay.
kind of like, well, that's odd. As he entered the home, he found Veronica on the living room floor and called police.
So he found her.
Yes. So he
Okay.
actually found her. So and obviously in a condition that he immediately called police.
This was the same day that she went to mass and then exchanged her son with Tim and gave her son to Tim.
Yeah, and then immediately drove home. Brian was on his way to her house. Like this all happened very, very quickly.
Okay, so this time frame is real short.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a like very, very small window that this happened. So Brian comes in, finds Veronica, immediately calls police, and when officers arrived, they noticed that like obviously her car was in the garage, the door was open, but there were items from her purse kind of spilled on the garage floor. Like obviously there was some sort of chaos that happened, and it seemed very obvious to them that she was targeted and followed and attacked as she was getting out of her vehicle.
Ah,
So her body was in the living room and there was, a pool of blood around her. Police noticed that she appeared to have multiple gunshot wounds. The curtains were pulled down, there were chairs moved around, and there was just these obvious signs that there was some sort of struggle inside the house.
when you say the curtains were pulled down, were they like pulled down off the wall?
Yeah, like they had
Okay.
been like obviously
Ripped off.
it seemed as though she was being chased by someone and there was just like furniture kind of thrown
Chaos.
around and whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
They noticed that she had powder burns on her hands, which would have indicated that she had tried to grab a gun and
Oh.
she'd obviously put up a fight against whoever had attacked her. Police didn't find a murder weapon at the house and noticed that there weren't any shell casings. So whoever had killed
Oh.
her had obviously taken the weapon and any shell casings with them. So they were just kind of like, shit, okay. But they did actually end up finding one shell casing that had rolled against a wall and was hidden. And so
Mm.
they did end up finding one shell casing. So that was at least something that they had to go on. And they also noticed that Veronica's purse and other items were at the scene, but her phone was missing, which was strange. They also found money on the kitchen counter. Her jewelry was still there. So it was pretty obvious that robbery wasn't the motive here. And so they're like, who the fuck? Who the fuck did this?
So the police didn't think that this was like a stage robbery. It was clear that the scene that they came into was like a struggle.
Yeah, and that she was like targeted the second she got home. She was getting out of her vehicle. Someone attacked her and then she tried to flee into the house.
Do you know if she drove straight home from the church?
Yes,
Okay.
dropped off her son, went right home. So obviously detectives show up and they discovered that Veronica had actually been the victim of a random mugging and armed robbery months before she was murdered.
Oh.
They knew this because they found a letter from the state of Tennessee informing her that the man who had attacked her was actually going to be released on parole. So they were immediately like, we're going to look into this motherfucker.
Yeah.
It just happened to be laying out, for them to find. So thinking that he was possibly seeking revenge, they looked into this guy, but they learned that he was actually still in jail at the time of her murder. So
That's a strong alibi.
yeah, and like crossed off the suspect list immediately. So then police are like, well, where do we go from here?
Where did they even start?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, Brian, the boyfriend, was immediately a person of interest in her murder because he was her partner, and that's always like the first place you fucking go. He found her body, red flag. There was a very small window, between her leaving the church and police arriving. So they're like, we gotta look into this guy. And they wondered how he didn't, like, by the time that he got to her house, how he didn't witness something, because there were just a lot of red flags that kind of pointed in Brian's direction. So they were looking into him and they thought that some of his behaviors that day were a little bit off. So they took him in for questioning that day. He was visibly upset by what had happened. He obviously really loved her, and he had talked to her that day right after she dropped off her son, and he had actually been at a friend's house whenever Veronica had called him. So he left his friend's house to go meet her. He'd stopped at a market to pick up something to drink. They spoke again, and then he drove to her house. So I mean, he talked to her like not long before he arrived at her house. So this was like such a short window. And
So
so
wait,
he
remind me, this happened in 2010.
correct.
Cell phone pinging off cell phone towers was a thing in 2010, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which is going to be a huge part of
Oh.
the case. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So he walked in, he saw her on the floor, and this is where police were kind of like they were a little bit sketched out by some of his actions that day. So he saw her on the floor, but he didn't check to see if she was breathing or had a pulse. He also washed his hands before police arrived. The detectives found it strange that he didn't try to assist her or, provide any sort of medical attention. But
I don't even know how I would respond if I went over to someone that I was romantically interested in's home and found them laying on their living room floor in a pool of blood, and they're clearly not moving. I'm making an
right.
assumption here that she was not moving.
Yeah, I mean, it was like he immediately was like, fuck, call police.
Yeah.
I think I would be in
I
a
don't
total
blame
state
him
of
for
shock.
that.
I
Yeah.
am not an EMT. I'm not a paramedic. I have no medical training whatsoever. I don't do well with blood. I don't do well with people being injured. I think I would just be like, I'm going to get you help because I can't provide you any sort of assistance. Also, I mean, we are true crime fans. You don't touch shit at a scene.
True.
You know what I mean? So it may have just been like, okay, I can't help her. I can't do anything. I'm not going to touch anything, but I'm going to call the police. Like in my mind, he did the right thing.
Fun fact,
Yeah.
I used to be an EMT.
No shit.
And even then, if I found somebody that I was romantically involved with laying on the floor of their living room in a pool of blood after having talked to them twice not very long ago, I just don't know how I would have responded.
Yeah.
I might have done the same thing Brian did.
Right.
Don't touch the body, call the fucking police.
Yeah. Also, you just became my emergency contact. Okay.
Cool.
I can see why detectives were a little bit leery about how he reacted, but I don't think that he did anything wrong. So he said that Veronica was the love of his life and insisted that he had nothing to do with the murder. But he did, during the interview, suggest that they look into Veronica's husband, Tim.
Wait, husband, were they still married?
Yes. Yes.
They were only separated.
They were separated and their divorce was close to being finalized.
Oh,
So,
dun dun dun.
Yeah. Brian informed detectives that Veronica and Tim were going through a very contentious divorce and a custody dispute over their son. And he thought that Tim was capable of doing some pretty gnarly things. So he was like, if you're going to look into somebody, I would start there.
Side note, how old was their son at this point?
There wasn't much about the son. I think he was 9.
Which I love the fact that there wasn't much about him because let's keep him out of this, right?
Exactly.
But he was old enough to understand, like when this all broke, and because obviously he had to have been told that his mama was no longer going to see
Yeah.
him. He was
Mhm.
old enough to understand the implications
Mhm.
of this. Okay.
They separated after 15 years of marriage.
And after 7 years, they had him.
Yeah, so
And
he
so
was
he
like
was 8 or 9.
8 or 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after, Brian had informed the detectives about maybe looking into Tim, they discovered that their divorce was just like within weeks of being finalized,
Oh.
and that things were going to be favorable to Veronica. So Brian had told them that Tim was not happy with the settlement or the custody agreement. They ended up releasing Brian after they found nothing tying him to the murder, and they kind of shifted their focus to Tim, so Veronica's soon to be ex-husband. So Tim was self-employed. He had his own company remodeling homes, and he'd hit a bit of a rough patch financially. And this was all kind of happening as Veronica's producer career was just like taking off. So this was kind of a big issue for them and became a huge source of contention in their marriage. And 12 months prior to the murder, Veronica had filed for divorce. And they'd fought about money and custody. And Tim was, I think, a little bit worried that she was actually going to take their son out of the country. I guess he maybe assumed that she was going to go back to Italy where she had family. So there was just a lot of contention, a lot of issues. And they learned that there was actually a $550,000 life insurance policy on Veronica.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah. And so Tim was obviously the beneficiary, but would have been taken off the policy once their divorce was final. So huge fucking red flag. Money is
Follow the
always,
money.
it's just very unfortunate. So police are like, all right, we need to find Tim. So they went to Tim's house to notify him of the murder and noticed that he didn't really seem that upset or surprised or even, just kind of even shaken up by the news. And my balls just dropped. What? Puberty. I love it. I'm a real boy. Anywho, he ended up getting a little bit more emotional when he was talking about having to tell his son about his mother's death. And his son was actually at his sister's house. I'm not sure why, but late at some point in that day he'd taken his son to his sister's house. So,
So this is all the same day. So let me just make sure I'm tracking here. So we've got Veronica going to mass. She exchanges her son with Tim, her still husband, but in a few weeks soon to be ex-husband.
mhm,
She gives her son to Tim. Tim goes off and does whatever. She drives directly home, gets murdered.
yes.
Brian finds her. The police immediately question Brian,
Mhm,
realize he's not the perpetrator. He says, "Yo, you should look at Tim."
mhm.
They then look at Tim. This is all the same day, and the
Right.
son is with his sister.
Yeah. So
Okay.
police had gone to his house not only to, I mean, they're still married, so they needed to inform him obviously that
Sure,
she had been
sure.
killed, but we're also kind of like, so where were you,
Tell us
dummy?
about your day.
Yeah. They ended up were like, can you come with us to the station? And they ended up questioning him. And he stated that he didn't want the divorce, but was adamant that he had nothing to do with Veronica's death, and that the last time he had seen her was at the church when he was picking up his son. So
Okay.
he had picked up his son. They had gone to a hardware store and a grocery store, and he'd actually provided police with receipts for both of these places that he had gone. And they ended up obtaining surveillance tapes from the stores. And so the receipts and the security footage from the stores actually matched up with what he'd said. And at that time, he was, cleared as a suspect.
Because the time window was so short. And he's saying, like, yeah, after I got my son back, we went to here and then we went to here. Here are the receipts. Oh, the police are like, okay, well, we're going to corroborate that. They did. Because the time window was so short, they're like, well,
Yeah,
he
there
must
was
not have
no
had
way
anything.
he could have
Okay.
been at her house committing the murder. And so then they were also able to verify by the security footage at the market where Brian had stopped to get a drink. What he had said his little timeline was getting to her house matched up with security footage too. So both of them were like cleared at that point. The stories that they had given were good.
Yeah, like now where are the police going to go?
Yeah, exactly. So they go back to the crime scene and, are like, what evidence do we have? Like, what are we going to do here? So they started canvassing the neighborhood, and a neighbor had said that they'd seen a light colored SUV or a van parked in kind of an alleyway behind Veronica's house. And it was there, but then it was gone by the time the police had arrived. And the medical examiner determined that Veronica had been shot 4 times, twice in the head, in the right shoulder, and then in the mid back. And she also had some defensive wounds on her arms.
Oh my God.
Ballistic tests, yeah, had shown that the shell casing they found determined that the shots had come from a 9mm gun. So
Okay.
they had that to go on, and that was really all that they had at that time. So they got the cell phone records for Veronica's phone, and they confirmed that she had been at the church and gone back home just like they thought, but the phone was not found at the scene, and so they assumed that the murderer had taken the phone with them when they left her house. The records showed that the phone left the scene and then was traveling down interstates in the Nashville area. And then the path of the phone just stopped. So they assumed that the phone had either been destroyed or maybe the battery had died, something, but they were just not able to track it at that point. But based on the call times on her phone, she was alive at 12:08 p.m. and dead by 12:20. So
Oh
there
my
was
gosh.
literally a 12-minute window that all of this went down.
I'm trying to think of why the perpetrator would have taken her phone.
I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Because you can get cell phone logs and things like that. So from the cell phone companies, but so like were there emails, text messages, something? Uh, Maybe it's irrelevant, but
Just, or maybe just in a panic, like, I'm going to take just anything I can think of. I don't know. Cause they obviously were like in and out.
yeah, firing 4 times from a gun, you could be in and out of there in less than like 3 minutes. And the fact that she was shot once in the back, she was clearly running from, and the curtains being pulled down, and like she was desperately trying to escape.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ugh, God.
Yeah. So police also got the phone records for Tim's phone, which matched the location of the stores that he'd visited, and so that all aligned. But there were multiple calls to and from one specific number before and after Tim met with Veronica at the church that day. So police found out that the number belonged to Corey Cotham, who was a friend of Tim and Veronica's. He had apparently even, like, I believe, lived with them at one point or stayed with them briefly.
So Corey knew both of them.
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
he was mostly, I think, a friend of Tim's, but he was a friend of both of theirs. So Tim played it off kind of like it was just like normal calls between dudes, just buddies, bros making calls like you do.
Broskies.
Yeah, just heading to the hardware store. What's up, bro?
Do you want to come over and watch Letterkenny?
Let's do it. We're going to high five for sure. So, police, wanted to look into Corey, and they found out that he had a criminal history for numerous assaults on women.
Oh shit.
Cool, cool, cool. So they got a warrant for his cell phone records, and his phone was hitting in the same general area as Veronica's that day. So
Red
near,
flag.
yeah, near the church, then near Veronica's home, and then on the same path on the interstates that Veronica's phone had taken. So, whoa, Corey.
Doesn't look good. Not a
Yeah,
good look.
nope. So police wanted to speak to Corey, but they also wanted to kind of play it cool and wanted him to cooperate. So they asked him to come in for questioning to help clear his friend Tim. So they kind of, just were like, "Look, we just need to clear your buddy, and can you just come in and answer a few questions?" So he said that he and Tim had spoken while he was driving back to Nashville from Kentucky after visiting one of his girlfriends. He
Wait,
was,
I
yeah.
flunked geography in high school, so
So Kentucky is north of Tennessee.
do they share a border?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
From Nashville, you can actually be in Kentucky. Like it's not far. It's like 40 miles or something, maybe. Don't hold me to that. Live there, but you just shoot north and you're like in Kentucky in no time.
My daddy
So,
was born in Kentucky.
oh,
Yeah, Louisville.
well.
Mhm. Hi, Dad.
Aw. Hey, Mr. Kentucky. So I think from Nashville to Louisville, it's like 3 hours maybe or something. But
Oh, okay, okay. That
it's
makes
not
sense.
far.
Sure.
But this motherfucker, he was on his way back to Nashville to see a girlfriend after leaving Kentucky, seeing another girlfriend.
So he's a player.
Yeah, so he was like on his way back to Nashville to another girlfriend's house. So this guy's a real dick. I don't know how many girlfriends he had, but whatever. Based on his story, it would have put him in a completely different area of Nashville, because Hermitage, where Veronica lived, was like the eastern part of Nashville. And so he must have been going to like West Nashville or something that just didn't match at all.
And because the time window was so short, if his story is to be believed, there's no way he could
Right.
have
Yeah.
been the one that shot her. Hmm. But his phone.
Yeah. So detectives wanted to make sure that his phone was actually with him that whole day. And so
Okay.
they were
Okay.
just kind of like trying to play it all cool. And he admitted that his phone is always with him.
Mm.
Boom. Because he's got a lot of honeys to chat with. So he obviously
He
needs to
can't
have
be
his
without
phone.
that phone.
Yeah, he needs that. So police are kind of like, hey, dickhead, we already pulled your phone records and you're a dumb, dirty liar. And he was like, what? Like, started to flip out and got really upset.
A
And
dumb, dirty liar.
but then he started getting like real defensive and whatever when they called him on it. So they're like, this son of a bitch. After that, police got a warrant for his vehicle as well, which turned out to be a champagne colored Cadillac Escalade, which matched the description seen by the
Oh.
neighbor at the scene of the crime.
Rule number 1, don't drive your own fucking car.
Right? So police searched the vehicle and they found a collapsible lunchbox, some gloves, clothing, shoes, and just some other items, but no hard evidence tying him to the murder.
I love the detail of the collapsible lunchbox. This was
Well,
not a regular lunchbox. This was
yeah,
a
it
collapsible.
collapsed. But
Space
you'll see why it's important. They didn't have really like any major thing tying him to the murder, so they had to release him that day, but they still considered him like their top suspect. So there was a call on Corey's phone that day at 12:28 p.m., just shortly after Veronica would have been murdered.
Right, because if I remember correctly, you said police have determined that she was alive at 12:08, but was dead by 12:20.
Correct.
And this call was 12:28.
Yes. So this would
Got
have
it.
been like right after her murder. So the number belonged to a former neighbor of Corey's who said that he had cleaned a gun for Corey a couple weeks earlier. And the gun was a 9mm. When Corey brought the gun to him, it was in a collapsible lunchbox.
Oh my god.
The evidence was just starting to stack up against this fucking idiot.
Why was it important to clean the gun? What a
My
fucking
assumption is
idiot.
like if it's clean, it's gonna work better. It's gonna be less likely to jam. He obviously didn't know how to do it on his own. So I was like, yo, dude, can you clean his gun up for me?
Premeditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So police were like, shit, I think this is our dude. So they end up talking to his girlfriend, or one of his fucking girlfriends. Her name is Jenny, the one that lived in Nashville that he was on his way back to after bumping with the chick in Kentucky.
Gross.
She said that he was with her at the time of the murder. She stated that he was with her from 12 to 12:30 and was certain of the time because she had made him lunch. And I guess they only eat at a certain time on Sundays. So police informed her that they knew she was lying based on the phone records and that she could go to jail for lying during the course of homicide, a homicide investigation. And she ended up calling her attorney, but eventually contacted detectives back wanting to discuss the case. And so she volunteered to come back in for questioning and wanted to, be honest with police and give them the details of what actually happened that day. So she stated that she had actually seen Corey that morning, but was kind of woken up. I think she was asleep when he showed up and was, she was just kind of like, whatever. And so she'd gone back to sleep. And when she woke up that afternoon, he was at her house, but she couldn't actually confirm that he was there at the time of the murder. So does that make sense? Like she was asleep before, when she woke up, he was there, but couldn't
She can't account for his whereabouts when she
yeah.
was straight up
So
unconscious.
she didn't make a lunch at 12 to 12:30 like she'd initially said. She also admitted that she had stolen a handgun from her ex-husband and put it in a lunchbox.
Was that lunchbox collapsible? Oh
It
my
wasn't
god.
a hard igloo. No, no, no. This fucker folded down and you could put it in a drawer. It was convenient. And she had hidden the lunchbox with the gun in it in her vehicle. The only other person who knew that she had possession of that gun was Corey. So his alibi went to
Do we know
absolute
why she
shit.
stole it from her
I don't
ex-husband?
know. It didn't really
Was it
say.
because she was an accomplice?
I think it was more just kind of like, fuck you. I'm going to take your handgun.
Okay. It's kind of irrelevant, I suppose, but
She did not steal it for Corey to use for any
ah,
reason. I think it was just kind of a fuck you to her ex-husband.
but Corey took advantage of that.
Exactly. So he's like,
If my suspicions are correct.
well, we're going to see. But so Jenny was like, all right, I'll work with you. Whatever you guys need, you got me. So investigators went through Corey's phone and they found a picture of a handgun on his phone. And they reached out to Jenny, his girlfriend's ex husband, who confirmed that the photo on Corey's phone was his gun and that the gun was missing. So all of these pieces are falling in together. And he'd also said, I used to shoot that gun on my property. And so there may be some shell casings laying around. And police did a quick search and they were actually able to find some of the spent shell casings on this dude's property. They did ballistics tests and were able to confirm that the gun matched the murder weapon
Because of that one shell.
that they'd found at the crime scene. Yeah.
Okay.
And so they also confirmed that Corey is a big, giant asshole.
A dumb, dirty liar.
Big, dumb, dirty lion asshole. So all of this evidence is obviously piling up against Corey. And Jenny had ended up calling detectives and said he's actually planning on leaving the country and is wanting to go to Barbados. So you guys need to stop
Oh my
him,
god, that's
or
so weird.
right from from the case
From
last
our
week.
first
Yeah.
episode. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of ties to Barbados.
Wow.
So they asked Jenny if she would be willing to wear a wire and try to get an actual confession from Corey, and she agreed to it. So she went from trying to cover for Corey to fuck this dude. Whatever switched in her, thank goodness for that. And so she wore a wire, called Corey, and told him that the police were coming after her because they had matched the gun to the crime. And so they had made that connection to her. And so she kind of played it off like she was freaking out and needed his help. So he started talking openly about a 9mm gun, a detail that the police had never mentioned. So that was kind of another huge red flag, and told her that she needed to contact Tim, Veronica's husband.
Oh.
So now they're like, whoa, what the fuck? So now they know that Tim is connected to this murder. And, he obviously had the most to gain from her death. So they're just like making all these connections. So Tim was arrested. He was pretty open with police, and he told police about a crisscross murder plan that he and Corey had. Basically, Corey was supposed to kill Veronica, and then Tim was supposed to kill the ex-husband of one of Corey's girlfriends. Not Jenny, another girlfriend's ex-husband. So this fucker just had girlfriends aplenty. So they had this plan that they were each gonna like murder someone for the other. This plan was inspired by, do you remember the movie from the 80s, Throw Mama from the Train?
Oh my God, you're joking.
No. If you're not familiar, this was a movie that had Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal, and it was kind of the same thing. In the film, Danny DeVito's character was supposed to kill Billy Crystal's character's ex-wife in return for killing his mother, and blah, blah, blah. In the movie, no one was killed, but this was kind of the inspiration for their big,
Oh
great
my
plan.
God.
So
Embarrassingly, that movie was kind of
nice job, a-holes.
popular in the US.
Yeah. I mean, and it was like a big comedy in the 80s, but like no one was actually killed. But I guess that was like these dipshits like inspiration. So
So I have a question. Why was Tim arrested and not Corey initially?
Corey was arrested. This
Okay.
this was just me tying like Tim into the plan as well. So
Oh, gotcha. So they arrested Corey because of all the circumstantial shit. And
yes,
then
yes.
because of the wire and him saying you need to talk to Tim, they were like, fuck
Yeah,
yeah, we're
so
gonna go
like,
get
okay,
Tim.
this
Okay.
wasn't just Corey killing Veronica. Like, obviously, Tim is involved now, so we need to bring him in as well. So let me take a little sip of my beer.
Yeah, you wet that whistle.
Mm.
Is it warm?
It's at least 84 degrees. It's room temp.
It's very hot today.
Damn it. Okay. So Tim said that they thought that, they were joking when that they had talked about this plan, and he didn't think that Corey was really going to follow through with it. Yeah, okay, whatever, fucker. But Tim had to have told Corey exactly where to be that day. There's no way that Tim wasn't clued in to this plan.
We're talking 12 minutes. Like Corey had to have been primed and like following her home to ambush her in the garage.
Yes. So they learned that Corey followed Veronica home that day. He had been at the church, followed her home, all while Tim could run some errands and build his dumb alibi. So obviously,
Get those receipts.
yeah, the grocery store, the hardware store, it was just all part of
my
his
God.
plan to
So
give him some distance from this crime scene.
Never mind. I answered my own question. I was going to ask like where his son was, but you had mentioned earlier that he had dropped his son off with his sister.
And I didn't get any details as to why that was. Like maybe there was a birthday party or whatever. Like,
Yeah, it's not really relevant, but
it still just seems a little like I
sketch.
know that the police are probably going to show up to my house, so I'd rather not have my son here to overhear. It just seemed it seemed calculated.
Like they're going to come notify me of Veronica's death, and I don't want our son to be here when that happens.
Right. And it may not have been that, but it seems like that's probably likely. So he's like building his alibi. And they learned that Corey had pulled in behind Veronica when she got to her house. He was wearing mask and gloves. He ran after her. She fought him off, and then he ended up shooting her. Tim told police that the plan was that he was going to pay Corey $35,000 from the life insurance policy payout that he was going to get after Veronica's death. Then Corey had offered to give Tim $10,000 to pay off the other guy. Part of their genius plan. So these fuckheads were tried separately, but both found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Thank God.
Fuck yeah.
Corey got a sentence of life without parole, and Tim got a life sentence, which means he will have to serve 51 years in prison before he's eligible for parole. And their son was raised by his aunt in Nashville. And that's all I know.
Fuck. I feel so fucking bad for their son.
Yeah.
Like, he lost both of his parents, and his dad's a complete fucking douchebag.
Right.
But can you imagine, like, to know that your father had your mother murdered, was like the mastermind behind it?
And I'm sure Corey was a part of his life too.
Yeah, sure. Because they were broskies. Ugh,
His mom's gone. And then,
disgusting.
I mean, obviously his dad was an important figure, but probably a second figure in his life murdered her.
Mm.
So,
The fact that you knew her and worked with her blows my fucking mind.
and like I said, I didn't know her well. Like I don't like when people try to attach themselves to tragedy to like make it about themselves. So I'm not trying to paint this picture like,
You knew of her. You had interactions
yeah,
with
she
her.
was a work acquaintance. We'll say that. But I knew enough about her to know that she was a good person, and I had heard her talk about her son multiple times and knew that she loved him so much. When we decided to do this, I was like, I'm covering Veronica's case first.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for sharing.
yeah, so
That was
that
intense.
is the story of Veronica Bozza, and unfortunately, one of many stories of just greed.
Money makes people do some really fucking crazy shit.
Yeah, and just not wanting to have to let go of things. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure Tim didn't really want full custody of his son, but he didn't want.
Her to have
Yeah,
full
yeah.
custody.
It's just like, it's just such horseshit when kids are used as.
Pawns.
And it's so ugly and it's so nasty and horrible.
And the victims are the kids.
Exactly.
Like, at the end of the day, these parents are fucking up their kids.
Right.
Oh
So,
my God.
it's just awful. But anyway, Veronica was an amazing person.
I'm glad you had an opportunity to know of her.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Cheers for getting through it.
Yeah, thanks. Cheers to you.
Clink.
Boop. And thank you for listening. All three of you. We appreciate it. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Whatever the highest rating you can give, we would appreciate it. It helps us immensely.
Yeah. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Instagram. If you've got any great cases that are not overcooked and baked, send us a message at crimewilltellpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Carrie.
Bye, Jamie.
Bye. My chair's scooted. Oh my God.
No, that was awesome.
If I could be sitting here in my bra and underwear, I would. I fucking would.
Absolutely, I'm a creep.
Of course.
Hard to have murder without a couple of a-holes, or at least one a-hole.
It's gonna be a little rough here. I'm washing a comforter.